For those who truly want a change in their life, the options can feel very, very overwhelming, especially with the sheer amount of self-help or self-improvement media that exists through the forms of books, video essays, podcasts, articles, you name it. It's all very available, very commercialized, and it's very easy for us to feel like we're drowned, very easy for us to feel astray or lost in our own improvement journeys. When we think of self-improvement, we are immediately reminded of those external medias. However, I think we rarely assess what self-improvement actually is. And it is something that is driven by the self. As ironic as it sounds, I think many people fail to realize that self-improvement is quite literally supposed to be centered around you. You're supposed to be the main accelerator, the main driver for self-improvement. Hence, self-improvement. I think because of how easy it is for us nowadays to just consume and absorb ourselves into these external medias, it's become very easy to feel comfortable in them. As in, you gain this sense of false productivity simply because you're engaging with this content. However, this is a very dangerous thing. And I think all of you have realized from the way I'm speaking, because when you absorb yourself into these incessant narratives, the constantly produced narratives that aren't even aligned with you as a person, it's extremely easy for yourself to lose yourself. Fixating on someone else's narrative that has nothing to do with you and your goals and what matters to you can easily dilute who you are as a person. You forget what matters to you, what's interesting to you. You start to adopt habits that have been commercialized, such as the notorious lifestyle of waking up at 6 a.m., drinking water, doing Pilates, whatever it is, right? You lose who you are as a person. You lose your individuality. What kind of lifestyle suits you? Without self-exploration, how will anyone become an individual? Really, they are just following a mass lifestyle that wasn't even designed for them specifically. If you find it hard to make an actual tangible change, then you know it's time to look inside yourself and face this beast, the true beast of self-improvement head on. And I talk about this as well in my previous video, where I say that growth is something that has to be unromanticized. And although you shouldn't feel overwhelmed in improvement, it is something that you simply cannot euphemize. You can't dilute it. It's something that you have to accept, and it's a process where you have to face your fears head on and subside these strong feelings that you have, addressing and acknowledging your desires and these strong feelings of anger, difficulty, desire, addiction. All of these strong feelings, they come with the actual process that initiates self-improvement. Today I'll be talking about just how self-improvement looks like, how people view it in general, how you can kickstart your own self-improvement, and how to think realistically. Hi, I'm Danya. Thank you for coming to my thoughtful spot on the internet. As always, if you want to drop a comment about something I said, or you want to make your own point from this video or inspired by this video, then please do so. This is a platform where I hope to share interesting discussions with people who are like-minded and provide an intellectual space for thinkers who love to go deep into topics. So today my first point will be the problem with modern self-improvement, what it is and what it isn't. Especially as of 2026, the jump in the trend has largely favored a more philosophical, I guess, wellness-oriented market. And yes, market. Because content is generally more focused on this bettered self, as people romanticize, the process of self-improvement. And I think this is a very rudimentary model of self-improvement that is being advertised. As in, it's just a typical drink more water, sleep 8 hours, work out every single day, learn this skill and this hobby. And while they are very good general ideas, when it is sold in the masses to multiple people who are looking for self-improvement, they get this false idea that this is what it has to look like, that this is what the ultimate human being looks like. This is the highest form you'll ever achieve. If you're not at this stage, then how can you call yourself a productive person, or how can you be part of society if you aren't following the mass routine? And the reality is that most people who do follow this routine, I guess, it could work for you, right? I mean, many of these habits are very healthy for you, and I wouldn't say they're harmful in any such way. However, it doesn't work specifically for everyone and perfectly for everyone. And I'm pretty sure that most people who do adopt this lifestyle, they feel this sense of discomfort and this lack of direction when they're doing it. Because at the end of the day, they didn't choose it. They didn't choose this lifestyle at all. They just bought it, essentially. Bought it with their time. They bought this lifestyle from someone else who could benefit someone else, but they never even bothered to think, what do I benefit from? What is a routine that makes me feel accomplished? And this is where people get this false illusion of self-driven improvement, right? Because there is this illusion that by adopting this kind of mass lifestyle, that everyone is automatically going to be their best version of themselves. However, this is extremely, extremely wrong, because how can you say this is your best self when you haven't even bothered to sit down and understand what makes me feel like my best? Self-exploration in general is something that is difficult to do, and most people don't know how to do it. Most people feel that it is very intimidating, and it's something at the back of their mind. They think that it's unnecessary, right? Because why would you put the effort in when you could just follow what everyone else is doing? Do something more intellectually understimulating by, absorbing yourself into some other narrative. However, this is when your sense of individuality is also compromised. How can you be an individual, a human being that operates autonomously, when you are living by someone else's lifestyle, someone else's way of operating? I think self-improvement does look more fierce than this, because it's meant to actually force you to look into the most intimate parts of yourself. You're not supposed to feel comfortable when you're evolving, which I also talk about in my previous video, that growth is something that requires you to make an effort. Whether it is a big or a small change, you are pushing yourself out of your existing boundaries. You're becoming bigger than your comfort bubble, essentially. When they see content of other people tend to think, oh, well, this is how we should be living anyway, why don't I follow this lifestyle? Then I can become an achieved and a worthy and a valued person. But that's really not the way, because it goes against their own priorities, their own goals. Everyone is so different because we are all individual beings. We're all genetically different, mentally different sometimes. If we don't follow our goals and aspirations, and we just conform to what everyone is doing, what the capitalist, commercial lifestyle is, if they don't follow that, then how can they be a part of a valued society? Self-improvement really looks like addressing the parts of yourself that you tend to put in the back of your mind head on, not ignoring them, not pushing them away, but really tackling the beast for what it is. Assessing the parts of yourself that may cause harm to yourself or others, or ones that are just not serving you well, and building a routine that works around your own goals, and doing it in a non-performative way, something that is inherently yours, that is oriented and tailored around your needs as a person, that also favors your mental health. Really, I think what I've established here is that self-driven and self-reflection based improvement will always be the best improvement, and you will see it in your levels of happiness, levels of satisfaction, levels of discipline and motivation. Because when you do something for yourself, you feel like, when you're free from a master. Essentially, when you follow lifestyles and content and levels of thinking from other people, you lose your ability to think for yourself. When you compromise on autonomy, you compromise on being an individual human being. So by, surrounding yourself with your own narrative, that's how you destroy that feeling of being distracted and askew from your path. Now, for my second point, I'll be talking about how to be realistic during self-improvement, what to expect, what not to expect, and really how this will operate, how self-improvement will appear in your life, and how you need to address certain obstacles along the way. So essentially, self-improvement is something difficult. It's never going to not be difficult in one way or the other. Whether it's high on the spectrum or low on the spectrum, it will always have some level of discomfort and sacrifice involved. I think the first stage to being realistic in your self-improvement really is understanding your limits and your strengths and your weaknesses and what things you can harness, right? Because if you overwork yourself, then you're never going to achieve what you want. You'll develop a negative feeling towards that goal, and inevitably burning out will happen if you go past your limits. So I guess testing the waters and also just sitting with yourself, reflecting on yourself and your past experiences will help you get a better idea of what things uplift you and what strengths you have that you can really flourish in and harness. When you're being realistic, you also have to understand that you are just a human being with, emotional and physical limits. So don't overwork yourself, right? So you'll always have doubts and troubles, and you'll always have this sense of weakness in yourself, especially when you're just about to achieve that goal, especially when you're just about to reach that higher stage of maturity. People tend to feel like, I am so, untalented, I can't do this, I'm weak, this is not going to work for me, I'm not seeing any results. And the truth is that really success is closer than you think. It is always closer than you think. And there's a Quranic verse which says, indeed, with hardship, there is ease. And so I think from this Islamic narrative, I have been able to accept and embrace those difficulties and those obstacles. When something difficult arises, you know that something better is coming your way. And the truth is that humans are, we are very irrational creatures. We're never going to be fully satisfied with anything. We'll always have doubts in our own progress. Meanwhile, if someone else was looking at you the whole time, if you had a camera watching you 24/7, I'm pretty sure the person behind the camera would think, what a diligent and productive person, what a, disciplined and motivated person. They really care about their goals, and, it's something that they prioritize in their life. So really, self-doubt is just an illusion. It is always going to be an illusion because there's no one saying that you can't do something. Because you are the driver of this whole journey. You steer at the front lines. You're the one in charge of everything. So you need to understand your own limits, but don't create false limits for yourself. Because anyone is capable of anything if they apply themselves in a realistic and a very diligent manner. Acknowledging that change will be a very difficult and a stagnant process is also very key to unlocking that resilience. For example, someone who wants to improve their health, if they struggle with binge eating and addiction to food, it can be very, very difficult to stop binging. Because of these strong feelings such as addiction, desire, anger, temper, sadness, these strong feelings are going to be difficult to eradicate. And I'm not expecting anyone to overnight just get rid of their short temper, right? Personally, I struggle with patience a lot. And although it is really the framework of my religion, Islam, that we believe that, sabr, patience, is key to peace, which is what Islam stands for. Although I know that, it's very difficult for me to not rush myself, not expect myself to be good and professional at the beginning of things. It's very difficult for me to just take a deep breath and let things go at a slower and more realistic pace. But that doesn't mean that it is impossible to work on it. I have, multiple times had to hold myself back from becoming angry, becoming impatient. And it feels wrong to yourself. It feels like you're doing a wrong to yourself because it kind of feels like you're invalidating your feelings. It felt like I was invalidating that version of me that was feeling very frustrated with what was happening. And although it does feel extremely invalidating, it is very important that you identify that moment and you let your pride wash away. Your pride needs to be swallowed. It needs to just go away in that moment, right? Subsiding your own strong feelings, is something important. And you should be very proud of yourself when you do that. When you hold your tongue back from saying something rude, when you hold yourself back from getting an extra, slice of cake if you're working on your body, right? When you do those things, honestly, your brain creates these new neuronal connections, right? It becomes like a learning opportunity for your body to understand that this is how I'm meant to operate. When you change your habits, when you block that negative routine, that's when your brain starts adapting and starts creating this healthy routine. So what I'm talking about basically is emotional friction. That, addiction, desire, fatigue, all of these are strong feelings that drive us to partake in the habits that we are accustomed to. When we consistently engage in something, we develop this ease to engage in them. If you think about it as a running track, if your goal is to run 1 kilometer, right, you have to train yourself to endure the pain that will come with running 1 kilometer. And so what you can say is that you have to train yourself to endure. You have to practice the endurance that is required to achieve a certain stage. If you want to achieve a healthier body, you need to endure that emotional friction of holding yourself back from the foods that you love but aren't exactly healthy for you. Being clear about your goals and prioritizing your values are also extremely key. And by involving yourself in those other narratives that have nothing to do with you as a person, that is what drives you away and makes you feel lost. When you follow someone else's advice too much, then you start to question what really matters to you. You start to lose sight of the things that you love. So being consistent with a singular narrative, you can even write it down. For example, if I say that I am gonna work out because I want to have a healthy body with no health issues, inshallah, and I want to also look my best. When you keep that in mind, you start to ignore everything else that people say, because everyone else has their own reasons for doing things. When you watch a video essay of someone else, what their journey is looks completely different to your journey, right? Their background has nothing to do with your background. So where they're coming from is different to where you're coming from. So I think this is why it's important to, absorb yourself in your own narrative, not to follow someone else's journey too much. You can use it as inspiration because that's where the support comes from, by surrounding yourself in a like-minded community. However, maintaining your individuality is the most fundamental thing throughout this whole journey. My last point will be just a guide on how to go through your self-improvement, what things that you should do, and really a general idea of how to harness your autonomy and also your, the underlying skills that you have, how to learn about yourself more. First, I would say sit with yourself, do some reflection, learn what kind of person you are, what matters to you, what do you aim to achieve, whether that be a spiritual, social, or a financial goal. Also work on a pace that is realistic, as I said, doesn't burn you out, but is proportioned to your expectations. Being realistic, don't go so easy on yourself, right? Have self-care and don't burn yourself out, but make sure you proportion your effort directly to what you expect from yourself. If you work at a slower pace than what is required to achieve that goal, it's difficult to say if it's really going to happen for you. If you work at a pace that is just right for you, that is in between the extremes, that's where you're going to flourish, you're going to gain some positive feelings from that experience. You won't feel as negative, or you won't feel like you're dragging your heels. You'll feel very productive and engaged really just very achieved. And by the end of that journey, you'll have a very positive relationship with growth itself. Try to limit these external sources, try to engage at least with the ones that are in your niche, the ones that are related to the strengths and weaknesses that you have. So at least you have a similar framework that can apply to yourself as a person. And lastly, remember your ultimate goal, right? Make sure that your ultimate purpose is constantly clear throughout the whole journey, that you don't feel lost and you don't forget the aspirations that your beginner self had, the same motivation and same passion and same fervor that your beginner self had at the start of your journey. I hope that this was an interesting take on what self-improvement actually is. I'm very adamant on ensuring people have their autonomy in this day and age. They're able to think for themselves and gain their own understandings of certain topics. I hope that this will also inspire more people to think about self-help in a very different way, in a more self-driven, very disciplined and individual way. I hope this video was able to help guide people and make them feel more self-oriented and more clear about what matters to them as a person. I want everyone to value their autonomy as individual beings. We have the power to not conform to other norms and other societies and what other people are doing. And the most powerful thing you have is the ability to make a decision, the ability to understand who you are as a person and take action based on those values. Thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you in my next video.